It's 4 o'clock, so I think we'll begin.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. First of all, my name's Jackie Porter. I'm the councillor and chairperson of the advisory group and the cabinet member for the built environment. And so this local plan advisory group is one of the meetings that we have to advise on the local plan. So first of all, can I welcome everybody to this virtual meeting of the local plan advisory group? The time's 4 o'clock. And this is a Winchester City Council meeting held under new regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April 2020 in response to the COVID situation and may well, as we know, carry on a little bit longer. There are a few housekeeping reminders I just wanted to mention as we run through, because there are new working practices in response to the regulations. Can I just ask everyone present in the virtual meeting to make sure your microphones remain muted and your camera is turned off if you're not addressing the meeting. It just reduces the background noise, it stops papers noising, phones, that sort of thing, and avoids any unintentional disturbances. And can I also advise that this meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the website, and then can be found next to the meeting details where the recordings will remain thereafter. And members and officers, where appropriate for each item, can you use the chat function to indicate you wish to speak or raise a point of order or explanation? Nancy Graham is going to keep a record of that, and then we can invite you to speak at the appropriate time. Each member
Yes, I have got that. Yes, it is now. I've got that.
Oh, good.
I don't know why I did that, but I can't get it on. Don't seem to get it on my main computer. But I got it on that one. That helps. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
So, Councillor Hutchinson, can you just mute your microphone, please? That'd be really helpful. And each member will be invited to speak in turn, and therefore I just encourage everybody to be as clear and make your contributions and check your own sound is on full volume before you start. I'd just also like to say welcome to all other councillors. We've invited this as an all-member briefing as well tonight to save repeating the whole thing twice, and we think it could be a useful way of moving forward. But also probably the many members of the public that might have joined this meeting today. Please do consider yourselves guests at this meeting. You're very welcome, and I hope that you can stay for the whole length of it. But if not, the papers are on the website, Winchester's website. Thank you very much. Nancy, can I now ask you to take a roll call of members and then we'll check which officers are here?
Yes, of course, Councillor Porter.
Thank you.
Well, in addition to yourself, obviously you're present. Can I ask each councillor to just state their name, confirm they're present as I read out the roll call. Councillor Brooke.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Councillor Evans.
Yes, present.
Councillor Ferguson.
Good afternoon, yes, present.
Councillor Horrell.
Good afternoon, yes, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Rutter.
Present.
And Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson, I can see you on the call.
Yes, present, sorry, present.
That's all right, thank you. Thanks, Chair, that's all members present.
Thank you. And can you just tell us which officers are on the call, please?
Yes, in addition to myself and Dave Shaw from Democratic Services, we have Simon Finch and Adrian Fox on the call, and various other strategic planning officers if required.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, first of all, are there any disclosures of interest which ought to be recorded for this meeting? Myself, it's a personal interest as the county councillor, although I don't think it ties up particularly with any item in this meeting, which is why it's a personal interest. Any other calls for personal or financial interests? No. Okay, thank you. Now it's to note any requests from councillors wishing to make representations on an agenda item, and I know that that Councillor Bell has made a request. Has anybody else made a request, Nancy?
No, I haven't received any other requests. Just while I'm speaking, I've just been informed on the chat that I forgot. Apologies, Catherine Knight from the legal department is also on the call.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. And I can see Councillor Hutchison has put her hand up, but I don't quite know why. I'll just take Councillor Hutchison's message quickly and then we can move on.
I was just wondering, am I able to ask some questions on the presentation after it or during it?
I think certainly you could put them into the chat and then we can certainly see what we are for time. But the local plan advisory group, I think, has to take precedence today, Councillor Hutchison, but we'll see how we're going for time. Okay.
I mean, I've got problems with the technology, so I'll do my best.
Thank you. Right, if you can just switch off your microphone and your camera, Councillor Hutchison, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. Right, Councillor Bell, I think is on the call, and I think she would like to ask some questions. Councillor Bell?
Councillor Porter, I don't believe Councillor Bell is in the meeting just yet. She hasn't joined, unfortunately.
Okay, we'll move on then, and then we'll come back and make sure that we catch her at the earliest opportunity. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. You'll have the minutes of the previous meeting. They were page 5 up to page 9 of the agenda and the papers. Has anybody got any comments that they'd like to make about the factual correctness of that meeting? Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair. Just on item 4, it was me who raised the question about the village design statements, not the visual design statements.
Oh yes, I see a problem here. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Could that be corrected, please, Nancy?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Is there anything else on page 6 that anybody's got any queries with? Page 7? Page 8? Or page 9? So with that amendment, is everybody happy? Could you just indicate by content whether you're happy with that? With the minutes?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, the next point is very simply placed, public participation. I don't think we've had a specific public participation, have we, Nancy?
No, Chair, there's been no members of the public registered for this meeting.
Okay, hopefully they're all watching it at home. Right, so the next point is
Chair.
really, yes? Yes, Caroline?
Apologies, Chair. I was just we haven't got matters arising from the minutes, and I don't see it particularly mentioned in the presentation. If that's incorrect, then perhaps you'd correct me. But on the items actions agreed, I just wanted to understand what our action was regarding item 3.
Hold on, let's just check item 3.
Thank you.
Do you mean the
affordable housing?
Yes, to identify the government's proposals would mean if the threshold for affordable housing, that one.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I believe that these are all questions that will be raised, but can I ask Mr. Fox to respond here? It's to identify what the government proposals would mean if the threshold was increased from 10 to 40 or 50.
Good afternoon, Chair. Was the question in relation to, obviously the government did consult on the changes to the threshold for affordable housing, which obviously we put in a response to City Council to that. Was it in relation to the actual numbers, or was it another question that Council?
No, it was to identify what the government proposals would mean if the threshold for affordable housing was increased from 10 to either 40 or 50 units, and to be conscious that first homes link then to second homes and last homes. And I presume, Councillor Horry, you're specifically asking, has a study been done to look at what would happen if the threshold was increased from 10 to 40 or 50?
Absolutely, Councillor Porter, and or if we've got a piece of work in hand, because obviously for us the affordable homes piece is important, given the nature of our district, just to understand where we're heading on that particular action. It may be in hand, just wanted clarity, and I couldn't see it in the documents that were sent to us for today.
No, Mr.
If
Fox,
I
would you
could
like
just,
to respond?
yeah,
Oh,
we did.
Mr.
Yeah. Well, we did do a piece of work to identify if the threshold was increased to 40 homes, and we certainly got that, and I can certainly email you that. I believe that was actually in the response that we did to Cabinet, but if I'm wrong, I think we actually identified the amount of homes that we would potentially miss out on if the threshold was increased, and I believe that was in the Cabinet report. But if it's not, I do have that figure, but I don't have it to hand. But we can email you. But I don't know if Mr. Finch wants to add anything else to that.
No, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do that. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Adrian's exactly right. It went into, as you know, we had two separate papers on the planning reforms. He had the changes to the existing system, and that was one of about 4 key measures in that, along with housing numbers, changes to types of consent and things like that. We sent, I think we took that through on about, I think it was the 29th of September, and then we followed that on in October with the response to the substantial changes which were in the planning white paper. Thank you, Chair.
I think actually what Councillor Horror is trying to do is to find out a figure, what that would mean in affordable homes if it were actually changed. And so based on our experience of the last X number of years, what would be the difference in the affordable housing number if it were increased from 10 to 40 or 50? And I will undertake to find that out, Councillor Horror.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Adrian thinks it is actually in the paper. I can't remember an exact figure, so we'll just double check. Thank you. Okay, and we have put ourselves forward as a pilot. We have started to have conversations with communities about village design statements and area design statements and conservation area statements. The officers have engaged in discussions, and we have also held the briefings and also subsequently another briefing with parishes. And this is item 6, which is the work programme. So hopefully those matters arising, although it wasn't in the minutes and the agenda, have now been covered. Is everybody happy about that? Yes? Okay. On now to the local plan action plan. And I'm going to ask Mr. Fox and Mr. Finch, I think they're probably going to do a double act on this. One of the things I was going to raise at this point, is Councillor Bell here, by the way, yet? I don't think she is. One thing I was going to raise at this point is that if any resident is listening and would like to be kept up to date with what we're doing in the local plan, then they should, it's actually more effective rather than just emailing into the planning department, where much of the work is actually related specifically to planning applications, that you sign up to our residents newsletter. If you go onto the Winchester website, www.winchester.gov.uk, below the coronavirus advice, there's a whole line of online tasks, and the one on the far right is sign up to our residents newsletter. We do urge you to sign up to the residents newsletter, and then from there you'll also be given advice of how to respond to any local planning and any updates that are going to be published. So please do use that opportunity to sign up to the residents newsletter, and then you'll be informed about a number of things, but including the local plan. Right, Adrian, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to screen share with you the presentation, so just bear with me. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk you through the local plan action plan. So first of all, what's the key influences on the local plan? As we just discussed, obviously substantial changes put forward in the white paper, planning for the future, and obviously a separate consultation on the government housing targets. Clearly, we're still in the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of obviously which is affecting how we're all operating and how we're all operating at home. And obviously, since the local plan process started, there's been a declaration on climate emergency that has to be at the forefront of our minds when obviously we're preparing the local plan. So how and why do these events actually impact on the local plan process? Well, in terms of the reform, you'll probably remember in the white paper, there was talk about having national development management policies and only having local policies in exceptional circumstances. There was talk of obviously increasing our housing targets from just under 700 dwellings per annum to over 1,000. There was guidance that we should have a reduced amount of evidence-based studies. So, for example, there was criticism regarding the sustainability appraisal, the duty to cooperate and things like that. The government is suggesting obviously should be abolished. And there's greater use of design codes to control the impacts of development. And that's something that I think the government is particularly clear on. In terms of obviously COVID-19, it has reduced our ability to talk face to face, but obviously clearly this is a good method to obviously engage with people through Teams and other methods. And in longer term, obviously it has had an impact in terms of the way that we travel, how we work, the local economy, the town centre and city centre viability, and the places that we're planning for in terms of the types of homes and how we plan for businesses in the future. And obviously climate emergency, I can't stress enough, is a key way of means of addressing obviously climate change and adaptation. Now that is subject to national policy because, as I've stated when I first started, the government is talking about national development management policies, and we don't know at this stage how they're going to actually address climate emergency within the national development management policies. So in terms of the short-term impacts on the local plan, we had a really productive officer workshop with our colleagues from the South Downs National Park and East Hants Local Authority to consider the proposed government reforms, and that was a really useful session, and that's helped shape our action plan that I'll come on to in a minute. Our officers from a variety of teams have attended a number of webinars and events to understand the proposed reforms, so we feel that we're completely up to speed with as much as we know at the moment. And obviously we delayed consulting on the strategic issues and options document because of obviously possible changes to the housing targets, and that was clearly the right decision to make to avoid any confusion and to take stock of obviously what the proposed changes are. So we've now analysed the white paper in detail and we produced a local plan action plan. That action plan that we've got on our agenda today is due to be discussed at Cabinet on the 16th of December. And what the action plan is, it's a roadmap, and it enables us to move forward and pivot between the current system or the reform system. So we've got a much greater understanding now of obviously how the system might change and what we need to be aware of in the horizon. The key aims of it is to try and minimise unnecessary and abortive work and expense. And we want to continue to make progress on the local plan. And we want to be ready for when the reforms come in place, that we've taken them into account when obviously we're formulating our plan. And that's really important, that we've kind of got that eye on the horizon. So a number of work streams have been identified, and we've kind of divided those up under the various topics, from engagement to options for accommodating growth, the design codes and policy, getting digital ready, and skills and resourcing. And we've identified a series of work streams arising from those actions, and we've colour coded them red, amber, green to try and make sure that we are aware which ones we can do now, which ones we're waiting for further clarification for government from, and which ones obviously at the moment it's just too unknown at the moment to do any work on. But I think it's a clear way of trying to map out a way forward. What we are planning to do is to undertake a high-level consultation on what we're calling strategic issues and priorities in February, March next year. What we know is that we could ask some very useful and valuable questions about the local plan vision, its objectives, and the key issues for priorities for action. Now, the key thing is the consultation will not include options for accommodating the Pacific housing growth, but it will include a question on the strategy of how the future development could be accommodated. And obviously, you recall when we were preparing the last document, we were very specific about how the growth could be divided up. As we don't know the actual housing figure yet, it's not going to be possible to do that, but we do think that it's very possible to do some meaningful engagement on some key issues and priorities for the future that will enable us to pivot between the existing system and the new system and to engage early. What else are we doing on engagement? Well, we are developing with a local company some local plan branding, and we're devising a new local plan website. That local plan website is going to be very much along the lines of what the government is suggesting in the white paper, which is very much, it should be digital, it should be GIS, and you should be able to zoom in by your postcode and find out information. So we're very keen to make sure that our kind of engagement is very much in line with the white paper. And in terms of obviously how we want to engage moving forward, we want to engage with the parish councils about our initial Sheila assessment. We're trying our best to complete our internal assessment of the Sheila sites. No decision's been made yet, and we want to have constructive conversations with the parish councils about our internal officer assessment. We want to do a call for sites again in February, March, and that will include small sites, self-build site, land for biodiversity net gain, carbon neutrality land, nitrate neutrality, renewable energy and green infrastructure. And we do think they are really important to do a call for sites for those particular sites. We need to front load the kind of technical and environmental information on the constraints and mitigations. So in other words, what is it about a site? What are the kind of technical information we need to know about the sites, and what environmental information do we need to know about sites? And that will underpin obviously our local design codes, which the government is very keen to for us to develop. So what's the options for accommodating growth? One of the options that obviously we have been contacted by the CPRE and a number of parish councils is the potential greenbelt designations. And we want to ask questions in the actual consultation document in February, March on the actual greenbelt designations. And we also want to look at the options for undertaking urban capacity assessment to understand what kind of opportunities we've got in the urban area before we start releasing greenfield sites. We also need to consider the options for meeting gypsies and travellers, show people's needs and how that could be accommodated, because we realise that obviously that is a pressing and important issue. So we feel that this consultation document is a good opportunity to ask some questions about gypsies and travellers, show people's needs. Now, clearly at the moment, we don't know what the housing target is, and we need to update the evidence base when we know that revised target. And obviously then we can obviously devise a set of strategic options and consult on those. But at the moment, we do not know the housing target for the district, so we can't make a decision on where that code can actually go, because at the moment we're still waiting for that figure. In terms of design codes and policies, we want to do an audit of existing design codes. We're not starting from a blank sheet of paper in terms of, obviously we do have a number of VDSs out there. We do have a number of local area design statements and conservation character area appraisals and design codes for strategic sites. We want to have a look at those, see what's worked well. And we had a good conversation with our colleagues in the South Downs National Park, where they're keen to develop a template. And my view is, if we're going to go out to a settlement, we make sure that we collect all the information at once, and it can cover a number of different badges, but we're trying to do it in a smart way. We want to establish design code working groups. Now, obviously, at the moment, we're waiting for the National Model Design Code, so we can't really progress that one with any haste at the moment, but we do want to establish a design code working group to obviously move that work stream forward. We want to review the existing design codes and the best practice from elsewhere, because clearly, again, we're not starting with a blank piece of paper. There is a lot of good practice out there. And obviously we need to look at how much training we need for officers and community to assist us with developing local design codes. We want to explore the opportunity to have pilot projects to update their village design statements. and think about how the village design statements could incorporate things about local design codes under the new system, how it can pick up on conservation character appraisals. So that's a good opportunity for local community groups to put themselves forward to help us develop the new system. As I said, once we get more clarity from the National Model Design Code, which is mooted to come out before Christmas, but we're still waiting for obviously confirmation on that. We do want to obviously look at local design codes and obviously demonstrate how obviously we can work with the local community to demonstrate obviously they have got consensus and obviously they have been worked together. And obviously that will involve working collaboratively with the local communities and developers to actually work up the local design codes. In the strategic issues and priorities document, we will be asking for comments on local development management policies, but this may need to be refined when we have got more information available about national policy and the scope for national to develop local plan policies. So our feeling is to enable us to pivot between both systems. We should put in some ideas for local policies, but this may need to be refined once we've got further information from the government about what national policies are and what exceptional circumstances you can have a local policy in. But our feeling is let's put it in at the moment, and then obviously we can obviously reassess that. In terms of getting digital ready, as I mentioned, we want to launch the new local plan website with the consultation, and that will very much have a digital kind of focus, and we want to create different things on that website to encourage people to interact with the consultation process. In order for us to do that, we need to do an audit of our GIS data, the Geographic Information System data, to produce an interactive map for the local plan website, and that's really important if we're trying to get information at a postcode level. In the white paper, you might recall that the government used this term prop tech companies and 3D modelling. We got a demonstration tomorrow from one prop tech company. There's no single kind of company out there that would offer us a package, but we need to think about how we use technology in a smart way. And like I said, the government is very clear that they want to use the prop tech sector to support that. And in London, for example, they use more 3D modelling and things like that, where you can put in your application and you can see what it would look like adjacent to your adjacent neighbours. We want to explore the opportunities for really how we get information out there, and obviously the receipt of SEAL fund, community infrastructure levy funds, is one way, and obviously demonstrating graphically how we can do that. We need to, however, consider about data ethics and the principal codes for ethical use of data. And that's important because obviously the more information you put on the website in terms of geographical information, the more you need to be aware of data ethics. So that's something that we do need to be aware of. In terms of skills and resources, a key priority is to do an audit of the existing skills within the council. That's in terms of what GIS skills we've got, what skills we've got for master planning, urban design, because they're all useful to understand what skills we've got within the local planning authority. The white paper put forward the suggestion that every local authority should have a chief officer for design and placement. We need to consider the options for that in terms of obviously whether or not it can be amalgamated with the current role, and obviously how we can take that role forward. We need to explore external funding opportunities, and obviously we've been fortunate with obviously the Winchester Future 50s work, but we need to keep our kind of abreast of what opportunities are out there, and clearly we put ourselves forward as a pilot authority to see if obviously we can get some assistance with that. And as I mentioned, we do need to do some training and some support for officers and for members on local design codes, and that will be really important moving forward, and obviously helping local communities, obviously preparing local design codes. So like I said, we want to make that inclusive as possible, but we are waiting for the National Model Design Code to come out first to give us a bit more guidance on that. So I'm going to conclude there and stop sharing, and I'm more than happy to take questions.
Okay, so I think we have, in fact, it came up through the chat. Should we have questions during it or afterwards? I thought it was probably better to let you continue through that process. I think we've also got the actual local plan action plan itself. So I'm going to ask first of all, has anybody got any questions on the presentation?
Chair, it's Nancy here. Councillor Brooke indicated that she'd like to ask a question midway through, so I assume she will want to, and also Councillor Evans as well. Okay,
shall we take Councillor Evans while we work out how we're going to deal with Councillor Bell, because it wasn't a question. Yes, I think we'll go through the questions from the committee first, and then we'll go through to Councillor Bell at the end. Otherwise, I think we're going to be struggling to go on and off back to Councillor Bell.
Oh, sorry, Chair. I think you might have misheard me. It's Councillor Brooke that wants to speak. Well, yes, we are working on the Councillor Bell, trying to get her into the meeting as well. Sorry.
Okay. So,
right,
Councillor Brooke, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. Coming to the presentation, talking about the Gypsy and Traveller piece, Mr. Fox alluded to it being a consultation for the Gypsy and Travellers as well. And as the portfolio, Mr. Fox probably aware that they're a notoriously difficult group to engage with, which is why historically we've always engaged specialists to consult with them on our behalf and to ensure that they engage in that consultation process effectively. I wanted to know what extra measures have been put in place with this consultation to ensure that population are able to engage and willing to engage with us. Thank you.
If I could just respond, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Just to clarify, we are currently doing a Gypsies and Traveller accommodation needs assessment, which has appointed specialist company to work out our need for the Gypsies and Travellers. What we need to do is twofold, really. We need to obviously clearly make sure that we do engage the Gypsies and Traveller community in the local plan process, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But secondly, what we need to do is also to explore within the consultation process how we could meet obviously the Gypsy and Traveller need. Obviously, like I say, I don't want to prejudge obviously the actual assessment yet because that work is still underway. But clearly there's different options to how you can meet the Gypsies and Traveller need in terms of the opportunities open to you. And I know from my experience from another local authority, there are different ways of meeting that need. And I think the consultation process will be a useful opportunity to explore with everybody the different ways that the Gypsy and Traveller need could be met. And that's from whether or not you should have, for example, and I'm only quoting these as examples, different policies to obviously include Gypsy and Travellers within large settlements, to obviously how you produce obviously standalone settlements. But I think there's some really good questions that we can ask everybody through this consultation process, how you could meet obviously the Gypsy and Traveller need. The good news is that the specialist company Opinion Research have done a lot of work with obviously Gypsy and Travellers, and they are our specialist company that will know the best way to approach them. As part of the consultation, we'll be sending out their advice to how we can engage them fully in the local plan process. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
So in answer to your question, Councillor Brooke, not only will we done special consultation work with them, we'll also be reaching out to ask their opinion during the local plan process. Is that okay? Is that an answer that you're happy with?
The specialist part is engaging through the general consultation piece. They don't, which is why we need the specialist part. So yes, thank you.
Right, okay, but in fact, as I say, we're going to try and make sure that they do have a voice in this. I think we've got Councillor Evans and then Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the previous conversation about Gypsies and Travellers, but I do have questions myself. a few years back, I did chair a principal scrutiny, which was the committee at the time, subgroup looking at gypsies and travellers' needs, and they came in quite readily and spoke to us. And I do hope that that work we did there hasn't just disappeared into the ether. Perhaps somebody could go back and look at our recommendations. My questions are from Adrian's presentation. The officers have met with officers of East Hants and South Downs National Park. So I just wondered what the approach was going to be in the South Downs National Park. Perhaps I should know because I do represent the City Council, but I haven't seen that. And then the CPRE request for Green Belt bothers me. I mean, Wickham, the ward that I represent, Southwark and Wickham, is in that proposed area, but it does eliminate so much of our district once you take out the South Downs National Park, and would push development up to the north of Winchester. And I don't suppose residents of, say, Councillor Horrell's area will be very pleased about that. So I don't know, perhaps we haven't decided how we're going to deal with that. And the design codes bother me slightly. I was reassured to hear the word local put in by Adrian later, because are these design codes going to be different according to the settlement that we're talking about? So that was a question on South Downs National Park, question on the Green Belt, and a question on design codes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Finch to answer your question on Green Belt, and possibly, I think, Mr. Fox to answer on the South Downs National Park and the design codes, please. So perhaps Mr. Finch would like to start, and then we'll move on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as Adrian has outlined, and through Councillor Evans as well, there is has been requests made regarding that from various quarters. I think, as I've said at previous meetings, that's quite a complicated issue for Winchester. As you know, Push has been looking at this question, and that affects, as Councillor Evans said, the southern parishes, but we're a much bigger district than that, of course, notwithstanding the national park, which is about 40% of it. So consequently, what we would like to do through the consultation in the new year is to include something around that Green Belt issue, because we would like to receive comments and consult on that issue. But as Councillor Evans alluded to, it is complicated in terms of the potential effects that would occur, and the push work, of course, is ongoing. What I was going to add is that green belts generally are strategic designations, and it's quite a high bar that the government sets in the NPPF against that. And I think I'm right in saying there haven't been many new green belts designated in recent years, but that's not to say that you couldn't do that, of course, but it does set the criteria against which they need to be assessed. And of course, it doesn't mean no development either. Because it's not simply a case of being able to designate, and effectively that means no development would take place, for the next 20, 30, 40 years, which is how the horizon, the time horizon over which a green belt is applied. It's not a short-term designation. So I don't have an answer in terms of the suitability for the district. What I can say, as has been alluded to, is that if we were to look at that, for example, around the southern parishes, there could be consequences to that in the middle and northern areas of the district. So we need to think about that very carefully. And as part of that, we'd like to include that as part of the consultation we're proposing to do with the action plan early in the new year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fox, would you like to comment on the design codes and the relationship with the South Downs National Park, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of design codes, yes, the word local it needs to be prominent, and yes, it does need to be different. I think what we need to do is come up with a template so that there is some consistency, and we're making sure that we pick up on all the right things we want to do. And that's where I think it's really important to talk to our surrounding local authorities to see if we can get some consensus on the things that we're looking at, but very much local, picking up the distinct characteristics of that settlement. So I think that is really important thing to do, and that's certainly something we're very well aware of. In terms of the South Downs National Park, I've been very keen since I took on this role to have a very good, close working relationship with them. Clearly, they'll need to produce their own local plan, but again, it was a really useful workshop to have with them, their officers, and obviously East Hants as well, which is a similar situation to us, where a lot of their local authority areas within the South Downs National Park. So they were a really helpful contributor to the workshop that we had. But we have a close working relationship with the South Downs National Park, and I want to definitely continue that. We've talked to them about this template idea, and they're very enthusiastic about that and working with us to see if they could roll that out to other local authorities. So I'd like to continue that really good professional working relationship with our colleagues in the South Downs National Park. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, are you happy with that response?
Well, I feel a bit nervous about the design codes template and consistency. You should be able to recognise whether you're in, say, Orsford or, you know, Denmead or whatever. So I do feel a bit nervous about the consistency approach, but perhaps that will come out of that local group.
Yeah, I think it's about consistency about what should be included in it for that particular community. So it's not about consistency being the same. There was a lot in the local plan, the future of planning, about pattern books, and I think there was a general concern about that. But this is about making sure you include the same sort of issues, so that the developers or homeowners would know what that was that tied into their design code.
I feel more reassured by that then, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just have 2, possibly 3 questions. My first question is really around all the additional work and resources that the City Council is being asked to put in to produce the local plan, given the white paper, and whether or not you could tell me whether there's been any central government funding being put forward to pay for some of this work, particularly the additional money that needs to be spent on IT, for the mapping system, for the digital engagement work. That's my first question. My second question was sort of similar to Councillor Evans around sort of the design codes. What I'm quite keen to understand is, in the consultation process, we could have some parts of the district who've never had a design code or never been involved in a neighbourhood plan, may not have felt it was they needed to. And how do we engage them to know that this might be something that they now need to look at really seriously, particularly to protect the distinctiveness of their own neighbourhood and not be lumped, for example, in the city into one design code for the whole city. And then also, we say we're going to consult on, we don't call it strategic issues and options, we call it strategic issues and priorities. And again, Mr. Fox mentioned at the beginning that at the moment, the consultation process was pretty silent on what would be a priority in terms of addressing the climate emergency. And I wondered, in our consultation, whether or not we're going to give people the options of actually putting forward their priorities for protecting green space, protecting biodiversity. So there are actually 3 questions. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to answer those, Mr. Fox?
Thank you, Chair. Okay. In terms of work and resources, I think this kind of hits the nail on the head in terms of why we produced a local plan action plan, because you've got to understand the actual task involved, which is what we've done, is broken down the actual tasks involved to actually work out what we actually need. At the moment, the white paper indicates that there might be some additional resources for local authorities, although they haven't been clear. The RTPI, for example, has lobbied the government and written a very forceful letter to the government and said how much resources they think the local authorities should have to implement this new system. The government hasn't gone back on that yet. And in terms of obviously the IT, yes, we are aware that this is very focused on IT, and there is no money at the moment promised by government to do that. What we need to do is obviously have to think about that from a council perspective and put something in the medium-term financial plan. That's quite challenging at the moment when we're still trying to unpick and understand who's out there and what kind of packages there are available to us. And we've got a demonstration tomorrow by one particular company, it's only one company, to show what could be done, and we need to continue to explore that. But I think what we probably need to do that is on a Hampshire-wide basis, because in terms of cost savings, that will be more logical. And as we all know, the designations don't stop at the administrative boundary, they probably go over administrative boundaries. So yes, we do need to look at that. We are awaiting obviously more information from government, and clearly one of the reasons for putting ourselves forward as a pilot is the potential that there might be some government money out there if we did that, but we are waiting to see at the moment. But fingers crossed that there is some money, because it will cost money. We know that, which is coming at the worst possible time. In terms of design codes, what we've done too is we've started to map where we've got local design codes, conservation character area appraisals, Pacific design codes, so we know where kind of which places haven't got anything at the moment. And obviously what we do need is, when we've got further information from the National Model Design Code, is start raising the profile of this, how to get involved, to raise awareness. We're going to need local people's help to do this. We've got 44 parishes. I can't go round them myself with my officers around each individual place. There's clearly not going to be the time for that. So we do need the local help and support. And that's where I think picking up on the previous point, the template will be helpful, because then we can make sure we pick up on the specific points. But like I say, we're not starting from a blank piece of paper. And I think that's a really important message, that there is some good practice out there.
And the last one was the green spaces.
Yeah, in terms of obviously the strategic issues and priorities, yes, at the moment it is silent on climate emergency. So what we're doing is we're suggesting that the paper that will come to Cabinet in January for the document, we're suggesting that we include the local policies that we identified and did a lot of work with our climate change officer to include those in there. If, for example, the government says you can't have those policies later on, because they might say that, hopefully there'll be some useful work that we could perhaps incorporate into local design codes and things like that. But I think it is important, given the uncertainty at the moment, to consult on those policies and say, this is what we want to do, and we're going to have to wait and see until the government actually comes out with clearer guidance on what it is they will allow us to do. But I will certainly be fighting the corner that we should have local policies on things, and it's a good opportunity to consult on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just add on there, really, that RTPI is Royal Town Planning Institute, for anybody that's listening that might not know. But I know that the government we've put ourselves forward as a pilot, and the government even this morning, somebody from the Planning Advisory Service was saying, please do put yourself forward if you want to be a pilot. So I'm really pleased we got in early on the game there. On design codes, actually being online is a great way. We've been keeping parish councils informed about what we're doing as we're going along. And at the last meeting, we realised that we've got, well, we do know anyway, we've got a lot of parishes that have got part Winchester City district in, as well as part of the area that is in the South Downs National Park. So we'll take them as a separate training exercise, because they may already have been doing work with the South Downs National Park. And of course, we've got the vision work going on in Winchester. So we've got the opportunity to use those three groups in different ways, but to communicate with them online, which I think will be a much more efficient way, and also get them to talk to each other about their own issues. And then green space, as we've said, we want to make sure we call for green space as well as space to be built on. Is there anything else, Councillor Ferguson, you'd just like to raise on that?
No, I just, I mean, you have mentioned it. I just wanted to mention about the design codes not to necessarily block the city as one. There are 5 wards which are unparished, and they are each a distinctive neighbourhood. There's distinctive characteristics, and I know we're talking about the vision, but we do always need to be mindful that the city may bear the brunt of a lot of the housing numbers, and so it's under the greatest risk, and also the green space is at the greatest priority, or the most scarce actually inside the city.
Yes, yes, and we have, when we've been working with the vision and talking with the people that have done that vision, the consultants and scientists have done that vision, it's been based on a mapping exercise as well, so that we can identify those areas where action plans or neighbourhood plans, community plans could be devised. So that's been part of the work that's been going on with that vision, and I know that presentation is going to the town forum in the next few days, so we look forward to seeing the final, or just before the final part of that, I think. And the other point I was going to make was about the funding. You're absolutely right. The PropTech issue is a huge one, because it could cost us a lot of money, and money which we may have to work with other councils in order to be most efficient in the way in which we spend that money. But I have already said to you, and I know that you'll hold the whole council's feet to the fire to make sure that we buy as local as we can in order to maintain the strength in our local economy as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor, just going to check. Councillor Rutter, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about parish council engagement. Is it possible to include some workshop format engagement with them? They tend to be the sort of people who would be effectively excluded from the enhanced digital engagement process and all the sort of online stuff. And with the lifting of lockdowns and things, I think if we can arrange some much more hands-on ways that they can discuss these issues that are facing them locally, I think that would be the most effective thing we could do. A lot of village design statements are rather out of date, and are we going to be offering them any professional support to update those within the local plan process? So as I say, I'm a bit concerned that using digital engagement will effectively exclude many members of the community and some organisations, and so we need to make sure that our engagement is with every level of the community and not just those that are digitally up to date, so that they can all make a contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to say that in terms of parish council themselves, we've had really high numbers attending the local the parish briefing, so hopefully that will continue. But I'm just going to get Mr. Fox to talk about the ways in which people can be involved, even if they aren't actually online, which is, we do appreciate that there will be people that won't be online. Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly at the moment we're in the government's hands in terms of how we can engage, but obviously we would hope that obviously in the new year, like everybody else, that there may be some lifting on the restrictions. What I want to do is work with the team, and particularly the comms team, to come up with a local plan engagement strategy that looks at a number of issues. But like I say, in terms of parish councils, I personally have had a lot more engagement with the parish councils personally since we've been in lockdown, because I've had calls with them online, etc. But I do appreciate that not everybody is digital ready, but what we need to do is obviously work out how we can engage with them, but part of that will be dependent on what restrictions we've got in place next year, which we just don't know at the moment. But clearly we will look at those opportunities, but obviously it is dependent on obviously the current situation, whether or not we are allowed to have any kind of face-to-face engagement. But obviously that is in the hands of the government at the moment. Thank you.
And we have had to update, as you know, our communication policies as a council, but we have always made sure that we include the possibility of sending out papers to the public and also having them available at certain sites. So I can assure you, Councillor Rutter, that is something. I think one of the points about the template is that it would effectively provide those parish councils with that professional advice and also enable them to do smaller scale consultations themselves using their own networks, which would be useful. Have you got anything else you wanted to ask?
No, thank you for that reassurance, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to ask also about village design statements and the code, but I think we've covered that pretty sufficiently at the moment. But my other question was all around students and houses of multiple occupancy and Article 4. As you know, in the city itself, we do have a growing problem in that various areas are being populated by students more and more. And I was wondering what could be done via the local plan to actually have a plan for student accommodation so that local residents can see where it's going to be and not have it sort of foisted upon them in inappropriate locations, which is what we're seeing now, or certainly we have been seeing over the last 3 or 4 years within the city itself. So I just wonder whether Mr. Fox might be able to comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, perhaps Chair, if you'd like me to pick up on that point. Okay.
Yes,
thank you, Councillor Thompson. Yes, I mean it's a subject that as you know, bubbles to the surface periodically, and one of the things we can do through the local plan is to assess not just, if you want to call them, more traditional types of housing need, but also some of these more potentially sort of specialist or niche accommodation, which we do need to understand, and we can therefore devise local policies in response to that, because I think a lot of the issues that we've had in places like Stanmore and Winnell, where we have made Article 4 directions in the last 5 or 6 years, is where over a period of time traditional family homes get converted to small HMOs, and of course we've also seen a number of very quite successful purpose-built student accommodation as well, which can cater for that, and also some suggestion coming up through things like the work with the vision as well that could serve a wider purpose in terms of giving people that first opportunity to get onto the housing ladder as well, so not just exclusively around students. So we need to have a look at that. The only note of caution I would say is when we have looked at other areas outside Stanmore and Winnell for Article 4 directions, it is quite a high bar that we need to satisfy to put in an Article 4 direction, because they are something which the government has provided clear guidance on. So that's not to say that you can't do it. Of course, we have done it, and we've done it twice already. We could do it again where the evidence suggests that there is a growing issue in a particular neighbourhood. What I wouldn't suggest we do is look at the city as just one large mass, if you like, in terms of the prevalence of HMOs will vary quite considerably from one part of the city to another. So it's something that has to be selective, needs to be evidence driven and based, but we can take action in those areas where it's becoming a particular problem. But equally, we can look at that in terms of assessing how we might positively respond to that demand within the local plan itself. I don't know if Mr. Fox would like to add anything more about the way we might be able to do that in terms of the consultation. Thank you, Chair.
I think if I could just add to Mr. Finch's comments, Chair, I think the key thing is obviously engaging, particularly with the universities, to understand their needs for the future in terms of the student population. Clearly, we're doing a call for sites as part of this proposed consultation in February, March. If obviously they've got land that they want to put forward, or obviously information about the number of students and where obviously they would like them obviously located, we can obviously use that early on engagement to identify sites for them. But I think the key to it is engaging with the universities to understand their needs and obviously planning for that in a positive way, so that we know where those needs can be best met. Thank you.
Can I just add on, though, that I believe that other cities, university cities, have decided to do something about this because it actually takes away family homes. So there are two sides to the story and two sides to that potential consultation. I don't know if Councillor Thompson would like to comment on that.
Yes, if I may, Chair, I think it was more about sort of certainly engaging with the universities to find out how and when they're looking to expand and where they feel those students could be housed. But it was really to give reassurance to local residents about purpose-built student accommodation, which I think we all agree is a good thing, rather than taking up family homes. But what we're seeing at the moment is a developer coming in and buying up a plot of land that maybe has 2 or 3 houses on, knocking them down and redeveloping, and you know, the applications are just coming in for inappropriate locations, I would suggest. So yes, it is all about engaging with the universities and finding out what their plans are and whether they do have any land on which to build accommodation, because it ought to be part of their responsibility, and indeed they ought to have their own master plans about how they are going to accommodate any growth in student numbers. So, but thank you. I think this is obviously a debate that needs to continue, because it's just going to be a growing problem within the town. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm also the Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, as you know, and have attended seminars and meetings about healthy homes. And at the moment, many HMOs don't have any living accommodation. They only have a kitchen and bathrooms and bedrooms. And I think that's really important that we make sure that anybody living in a home that has a relatively small amount of space attached to it has some sort of living area. So I think that's really important, that we have that engagement with the university and with the public as well. Councillor Horrell, I gather you haven't got chat, but you'd like to speak, and then I'll come back to Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have several questions, and thank you to Mr. Fox for his presentation. A couple of points of clarification for those of us who are listening, just so that we're all clear. You indicate your ambition to undertake an urban capacity assessment. Could you just expand slightly more on what that means, where that is, and when and how that will be done? You talk particularly about a call for sites on page 18 of the report regarding self-build, but you don't talk about custom build. I wondered whether that was just an oversight. We have mentioned briefly this afternoon push, but clearly there is much discussion going on with our fellow authorities via that committee group, and that Councillor Cutler, I know, represents us on. Could you update on everyone's view of where we're heading regarding the consultations? That would be helpful to understand. Also, the comment on page 17 that the consultation will not include options for accommodating specific targets, and I suppose the question I ask to those doing it is that where does that leave all the residents who clearly will have a view on all of the developments are coming to the fore at the moment? The intention is to consult in February and March, but only at a high level, where you're saying you'll talk about the vision, the objectives, the key issues, but not about housing targets. And I've used this expression before, but I think it's the sort of Damocles hanging over residents. They'll wonder how can they contribute when they've got Royal Down and Mitchell Devastation promoting their schemes avidly and enthusiastically, and yet we're not going to be giving our local bodies the opportunity to comment on the housing element. So a very significant strategic step in this document that I can't say I am supportive of in any shape or form. Could I ask also, and I know Councillor Ferguson is developing the economic strategy, but with homes must come jobs and opportunities for employment, and how that's being woven into that, because obviously that is a new piece of work that is being developed. And also a rather great title, the Chief Officer for Design and Placement. Again, for the uninitiated, what does that really mean, and what will that person be tasked to do? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I have written those down, Councillor Horrell, and I was going to say on page 17 you're discussing housing targets. All I can say is it's the government's dream and it's our nightmare at the moment, because we have absolutely no idea of when those numbers are going to come to us. So what we don't want to do is frighten the public with a number which may never happen. We've heard it rumoured that those numbers are going to be reduced in rural areas, but we have no proof of that. So at the moment, that's why we're not mentioning housing numbers. If housing numbers come in, we can then start having those conversations. But I don't think at the moment we're in a position to ask the public about that. However, Adrian, first one is urban capacity assessment, and then a call for sites for custom build.
Chair, can I just ask before Mr. Fox begins, and just a question to you then. The paper though does say that parish councils will be asked to comment about Sheilas. And although we know Sheilas are just a request for a development, they're not necessarily a confirmed site for development. How can anyone comment on those when we don't know what the end game is? How can we ask for support for Sheilas to be given by residents or parishes or town councils when that could, if you took them all, be the 40,000 houses that clearly we don't need? But how do we get them to comment in a vacuum?
Well, I'm going to answer, and then perhaps Mr. Fox might like to answer as well. But there are developments within those parishes where they are reasonably happy, or they're interested in what the possibilities of those developments could do, because they can bring other things to their developments. They can bring cycle routes, they can bring open space. So that's where we're very keen to make sure we know that if something has been worked up with a parish, because at the moment we don't know that, that's what we want to know. It's not about, generally it's not about those ones where people feel they're being encroached upon. It's about the ones where they've been working over a period of years, and perhaps it can be included in their neighbourhood plan. And I know there are communities that have those sites already that they are working on. So I'm going to leave that to Mr. Fox though, so he can add that into his response. Adrian.
Thank you very much, Chair. In terms of the urban capacity assessment, I've been involved in several of these. What we're trying to understand is what is the capacity of the existing urban area to accommodate growth? And I do think that that's a very important question to start the local plan making process with. And we do need local communities to come forward and say, is there a brownfield site? Is there a kind of old industrial unit, a brownfield site that could accommodate homes? And that's something I know CPRE are very clear that obviously we shouldn't be using, for example, greenfield sites until we've exhausted all the opportunities for brownfield sites. So I would like, obviously, the local community to work with our officers to come forward with those sites, because ultimately they know the area a lot better than we do in terms of obviously particular sites. So I think that's a really important process to go through. In terms of actually the timetable for doing that, I'm afraid I haven't got a timetable to share with you today. but I do want to obviously do that work next year, because I do think that's really important to obviously work with the local communities to identify what brownfield opportunities we've got. And that's going to be really important when we go to the examination process to demonstrate what brownfield sites we've looked at. In terms of self-build, yes, we can add custom build. The trouble is the list ends up, you know, or we could ask that. Basically, we started off with, we want to do a call for green sites, as we call them, because we thought that was the major priority, but clearly there are other things in there. So we're not prejudicing anybody coming forward with any other sites, so we can add those to the list. That's not a problem. It's just obviously making sure that's complete. In terms of push, so the push are continuing. They've appointed a range of consultants to do a number of studies on the strategic development areas, and they are progressing with their consultants and working in partnership with obviously the push authorities. At the moment, that work is still ongoing. We're doing transport assessments, habitat regulations assessment, and sustainability appraisal of the sites. That work is still ongoing. At the moment, there's various meetings scheduled over the next coming months. But like I say, it's still ongoing at the moment, and that work will be useful for us because they're actually assessing some of the sites that have come forward through the Sheila process. So some of that work will already be done for us, which is useful. Picking up on the point about obviously housing, as I said, we can't say with any certainty at the moment this is our housing target, because obviously clearly we don't know. What we can do in the consultation document is to say, well, OK, it could be a range of housing between this and that. But what we won't be doing is identifying specific targets for settlements, because clearly we can't do that. I think it would start a lot of hairs running, because obviously the range would be so substantial. And that's why obviously we paused work on the strategic issues and options document back in August time. So like I say, we will identify that there is an upper target and a lower target, but that's as far as we can go. But we do feel that we want to make progress with the local plan, and we do feel that there's some meaningful things that we can engage the local community with on February and March. And I am very keen to move the local plan process forward, and hence why we've trying to kind of navigate our way through this mirage of uncertainty to produce something that is meaningful to consult on in February and March. I do think there is some key issues that would be really useful to gain feedback on. And in terms of the green economic strategy, I have been talking to the officers from the economic development team about that particular strategy and how that work needs to feed into the local plan. And again, how that work needs to feed into our kind of digital approach first, of making sure that information is available on the GIS to show where, for example, intervention areas need to happen. So I have been speaking to them about the brief for that work to ensure that it will fit into our local plan process, because I do think it's a critical piece of work, and I have put forward some of the local plan budget to accommodate that. In terms of the Chief Officer for Design, I can only go on what the white paper says, which is not a lot, I'm afraid. In terms of what that role and responsibility is done. Clearly that role needs to be at a senior level. It needs to have some kind of coordination role in terms of making sure that local design codes are obviously being prepared, and obviously a timetable for that. But in terms of obviously the detail, in terms of exactly what that job will involve, I don't think it's going to be a standalone position. It more than likely will be amalgamated with a current post, given the current budget situation. But the key thing is that it's important to have that role in the local authority, and obviously how that role actually operates within the organisation, and obviously interacts with members like yourself. But like I say, there's not a lot of detail in the white paper about the exact specifics of that role. So we need to be clear and need to shape that for our own purposes. I think that was all the questions, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Finch, do you want to say something?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Yes, just picking up on that last point, I think it's something we are giving some consideration to now. As Adrian said, there's not necessarily an enormous amount of detail in the white paper, but I think clearly the thrust of it is there. My reading and understanding of it, it is about having somebody within local authorities that is effectively sort of pioneering that, if you like, or pushing forward that important element of planning, which is design and placemaking. And as a result of which, we're having that conversation now at ELB, with ELB, to see how we might take that forward. So that is a piece of work, excuse me, which we're already having a look at. I don't have an answer for you today, but as I say, rest assured, we're certainly something that we know is important, and we just want to make sure that we can identify the best options to take that matter forward. Thank you, Chair.
I think this ties up, doesn't it, with the principle that if you do go for the growth areas or even the renew areas, that effectively the local plan is giving planning permission to that site. So that work on design would already, and about placemaking, would already have been done before it goes to local plan process, for the local plan inspection process. Is that right, Simon?
Well, I think it's about front loading it. As we said when we took the papers through Cabinet, it's shifting a lot of the work from the development management side of things at the moment to stop what the government perceives to be as a very long, protracted process, often ending in, for developers' disappointment potentially, and loading that into the local plan, which is why the local plans under the reforms will look different, very different, and they will be this interactive, very much spatially map-based interactive type format, and that is to give a greater degree of certainty, not just for developers but also for communities, and that's something coming across very clearly from the members that have spoken today about parish councils and members of the public, etc. So we need to get, as Adrian has explained, we need to get those people engaged to feed into that front-loading process, and that's where a lot of it will be decided, rather than it coming after at the development management part of the process at the moment. Thanks, Chair.
And tying up from that, I think engagement on there, on the local, we've already started on looking at branding for the local plan, so that the public know easily where they can go and make their comments, and also find the information that they need. And you raised the point about, or I think Adrian raised the point about data ethics, and perhaps we can include that in a future local plan advisory group, because I think it's important that we're not giving so much data away about a particular household that it puts them in a particular position. And I'm sure there's a lot more to consider as well. Perhaps that will come out as we interview more prop tech companies.
Chair, could I just ask a supplementary to a comment I think Mr. Fox made in reply to one of my questions. Given our requirement to demonstrate brownfield development over and above anything else as part of our plan process, as our first objective, as it were, above any other type of development. Why do we not say that more overtly in the process that we've outlined here today, and that is our priority over any greenfield, and we will exhaust all of that before we look at anything else, which would be somewhat reassuring, even if we're not in your plan to discuss housing numbers, to indicate the direction of travel. Thank you.
And while we're there, can we also just carry on that the timeline of the push work on Greenbelt with fellow authorities? Can we just do that while you're talking, Adrian? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, a very good point there, Councillor. We can certainly make that more overtly clear, because that's a key priority for us, obviously given our climate emergency as well, in terms of obviously making sure that obviously we are promoting a sustainable plan. So that again is a clear message that we can put out in February, March time, that obviously our priority is obviously the brownfield over the greenfield, and obviously then seeking people's views about how they can help us obviously demonstrate that, because we do need help to obviously meet this challenging timetable. I do think that's an important message. In terms of the Greenbelt issue, Push are going to be looking at that, but they're not going to be looking at that until the end part of the process. So they are completing the studies first of the assessment of sites, and then they will be, I understand, looking at obviously the greenbelt issue. But like I say, we do feel that the opportunity is there in February, March time to raise some questions, and also to get rid of some myths about greenbelt, to make it clearly sure about the tests that have to be met to actually introduce a greenbelt, which are very, very high, as Mr. Finch has mentioned. I do think that's a very important message to get across about the alternative ways to not designating a green belt, the alternative ways which are available to us, and that's the key test in the NPPF, and that's what we need to demonstrate. So again, I do think there's a communication message about getting across the difference between the different types of policy approaches, because we will need to demonstrate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, you'd like to speak?
Yes. It was just really on page, well, I've got page numbers, page 18, when we talk about the call for sites. I just wanted to make sure that we will definitely be calling for more employment land sites as well. We know that this white paper is almost silent on the employment needs for all the additional people that will be housed in these multiple new homes that are being imposed upon the district. And while we want sustainable development means providing homes for people close to where they work, close to the services they need. And I would want to ward against the danger that we actually end up converting valuable employment space, office space is then converted to housing, and then we find that we have nowhere for people to actually work. So it's really just for a confirmation that given the drastically raised housing numbers that are being imposed upon the district by central government, that we actually will also be calling for more additional employment sites to make that development sustainable. Thank you.
If I could just reassure Councillor Ferguson, yes, very much so. Call for employment sites is critical to that, and obviously understanding what type of employment sites are available, and obviously the Green Economic Development Strategy will feed into that work. So yes, very, very clear to make sure that it's not all about housing, which everybody seems to get focused on. It is about other uses, and as Sheila suggests, it is a strategic housing economic and land availability study. So it is about employment. I want to get that message across, and that needs to be clear in the messaging. So yes, please have my assurance.
Thank you.
And the other thing that the future planning was actually completely silent about was transport links, which obviously also are often links to work as well. So we should be making sure that we've included the Winchester movement strategy in part, and in fact the district movement strategy. We should have a district movement strategy about how we want people to move around our district, particularly in light of our climate emergency. Councillor Ferguson, you look like you'd like to say something.
I was about
you're muted.
And also infrastructure for getting people about, but you've just said it for me, so thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions that anybody would like to raise at this point? I think it's been really useful. I've written down lots of notes, so I will try and make sure that we go through those so that your points are made and included in the cabinet paper, so that the general public will be able to make sure they understand it too. Has anybody else got anything else before I ask Councillor Bell, who's finally managed to get in, I think, by mobile phone?
Councillor, I believe Councillor Horrell might have put her hand up and wanted to speak.
Right. Councillor Horrell?
Thank you, Chair. A question about, we've mentioned Sheila's this afternoon, and that they will be put to the consultation process. Can I just understand the Hampshire County Council land that is in the Sheilas, and the merits, have we sought that out? Have they sorted out or sought us out for land in our district, and what is the background to some of those sites that have found their way into the Sheila and might be creating some anxiety for some of our residents by the fact that they are being requested for development.
Yes, in fact, some are brownfield land and some are what is considered countryside at the moment, and I presume you're relating that to the Royal Down one. Mr. Fox, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Only the fact that we will be dealing with all the sites on a level playing field, whether or not they're put forward by Hampshire, individual landowner, and assessing them against the standard criteria that we're assessing all sites against. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we will be doing a red, amber, green assessment from our internal assessment. And they're the maps that we want to share and engage with the parish councils at an early stage to establish obviously their views on whether or not a site's got merits or not. And clearly as a result of that work, some will fall off, the kind of thing. And obviously once we know the housing number, we can obviously plan more certainty. But like I say, we are doing a comprehensive assessment of those sites. All sites are treated the same, irrespective of obviously whether or not they're Hampshire or another landowner. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll stop there, but I do want to make sure that Councillor Bell, who took the time to register to speak today, has an opportunity to do so. Councillor Bell?
Yes, I am here.
There. Good.
I have been here for some time.
I know, but as it was, we'd started that item.
I know. All right, I'm not complaining. I know you've moved on, and I am on Teams eventually. That took a while, but anyway, here we are. It's a little bit odd speaking at the end of the meeting rather than beginning, because obviously you try to say things that will be picked up in discussion and debate. I was very pleased to hear Councillor Ferguson's intervention just now on employment sites, because of course Hursley and Oliver's Battery. Hursley has lost several employment sites. People don't think about it, but there was a garage, a bakery, 2 shops, 2 more shops than what's left. And Oliver's Battery just last week had a commercial retail area lost to residential development. And there is a certain irony, I would say, in strategic plans that prioritise employment sites within developments and yet lose them or allow them to be lost where they exist. And I just like to make that point, because I think that is really important. The sites that we've lost within our villages were not polluting or noisy or difficult. They were employment sites of the very sort that you might have wanted within a village, and they've gone. So let's think about that when we talk about new strategic planning. I'm aware that the agenda for today was not to do with to do with the Winchester local plan going forward, and not for specific developments. But my point in speaking, and it would have been at the beginning, was about the development that's come forward that everybody knows about, that's on social media at the moment. A proposal for a development named Royal Down, for 5,000 houses, associated facilities and a bypass road. Bypassed in inverted commas, because frankly a bypass road that ends up at Poles Lane Junction next to our school is not a bypass of the village. However, there's not time, no purpose in this meeting to go into detail of the development. The proposal is shocking in its scale and extent, and despite its wording makes no real connection with the 2 parishes most affected. In fact, I think it has decided that by putting some kind of gap between the 2 parishes that it doesn't need to. In fact, Compton and Shawford are also affected because of the loss of a local gap. Otterbourne to the south, Badger Farm to the north are affected by increased traffic implications of such a development. When I moved to Hursley 40 years ago, one of the main attractions was the fact that when you approached in whatever direction, north, south, east, west, whatever, well, there wasn't a west approach, but other 3, you passed open countryside. And of all the approaches, the A3090 southbound afforded vistas of open fields flanked by areas of woodland. What the current proposal suggests would have swathes of solar array to the west, dense woodland to the east. Tree planting and renewable energy are of course important, but my solar PVs are on my roof, and that's the best place for them, and on industrial roofs and barn roofs if we can manage that, not on fields. Dense woodland is not the only aspect of landscape or biodiversity. During the pandemic, many people discovered the joys of Port Lane for cycling, running and walking. It might have been hidden before, it isn't hidden now. It is a dry valley, hidden from the main road, but not hidden from those who regularly use this green route. Housing on both sides of this road will simply wreck everything around it. The term dry valley itself is ironic in the sense that drainage is underground and it comes out in Hursley village. The water table is very high, and every 10 years or so, Hursley has a major groundwater flooding event, and 5,000 additional houses, no matter how permeable the driveways, will exacerbate this problem to the nth degree. Suffice it to say that there is no support in Hursley or Oliver's Battery or in adjoining parishes for this outrageously overscale development. When you are assessing this proposal against your criteria, please factor in this vehement opposition. What I'd like the portfolio holder or strategic planning officer to confirm today for those present and anyone listening online is that this development proposal is as premature as it is unacceptable, that it will be received by Winchester City Council into the local planning process and will be assessed at the appropriate time against a range of criteria put forward by the government to reform planning law. In terms of the numbers of housing required in Winchester District, we know that Conservative backbenchers and a wide range of campaigning organisations have argued against the flawed algorithms put forward, which claim that by hugely increasing housing numbers we will bring down price. A notion that anyone observing the excessively slow output from Barton Farm will understand to be false. If required housing numbers are revised downwards, as we believe they will be, then a development of this scale in such a sensitive area is clearly off the scale. Thank you. I'm sorry if I've gone over time.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I would like to reiterate today actually that there is a formal process for call for sites, and any developer can place their own site on that register. But I'd just like to ask Mr. Fox if you'd just like to explain the process of the Sheila through and how it is part of the local plan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bell. Just like to reassure everybody on the call tonight that the status of the raw down proposal is exactly the same as any other Sheila site that is put forward by a developer landowner. We have to do the call for sites. That's the process that we have to go through, and that's required by central government. The fact that something is a Sheila site does not mean that it will be developed. We are trying to be as open and as transparent as possible by sharing that information that is available in terms of what Sheila sites have come forward. There are many sites that have been put forward in the Sheila, far too many for what actually we will eventually need. And the key thing is that we're undertaking our own assessment of those sites and we're doing it all on a level playing field. And that information will be shared once we've actually completed that work. And the key thing is that we want to start engaging next year with the parish councils about our initial conclusions. And the thing is, until we actually know the number that we're going for, we will not be making any decisions on those Sheila sites in terms of obviously whether or not any sites are suitable, because at the moment we don't know the housing number. But what we can do is complete our initial assessment. But like I say, please be rest assured, it is only a site. There's no planning application. It is only a site that's been put forward in the Sheila. And I appreciate that it's causing local concern, but obviously that's the process that we have to follow. Thank you, Chair.
And as I said, thank you very much, Mr. Fox. And as I said at the beginning, the best way for people to be kept informed to exactly the City Council's position is to go online at winchester.gov.uk, look down, and there are boxes, blue boxes, and on the far right is keep me posted. Please do ask residents to do that, and then they can be updated with the situation as exactly as it is through the officer process. Thank you. Does anybody have any debate that they'd like to raise about the local plan action plan, please?
Chair, I don't know whether this is appropriate time, sorry to interrupt, it's Nancy here. Councillor Evans has indicated she's got a question on the appendix.
Yes, please do, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman, but I know that this meeting is due to finish at 6, and I didn't know how you were going to approach questions, and I have listened to what Mr. Fox has just said, but in the appendix, page 26, the appendix, page 5, what really sort of worried me was the options for accommodating growth, and with the expectation that Sheila sites may in future, I know it only says may in future form the basis of growth areas under a new style local plan. Now, I did listen to, and that wasn't in the light of what Councillor Bell has just said, but that did send a sort of shiver down my spine, because all the Sheila sites in our area are just speculative, you know, developers thinking, oh, I'll put my land forward and let's see what I get out of it. So I think I'm reassured that local parish councils and whatever will have an input, but I am very nervous about that statement that the development will come from the Sheila sites.
Okay, I think before Mr. Fox responds, actually I was at a planning seminar recently where they said the best thing was to do is you design your local plan and then ask for sites. Unfortunately, everybody laughed on the call because we know that's not what happens, but that would be the ideal world, when you design what your local plan should look like and then call for sites. But in view of that comment, Mr. Fox, do you think we might be able to rearrange what we've written there so that it makes it very clear what the intention is? Or Mr. Finch, Simon Finch, you're going to talk, perhaps. You've just come up on the screen, yes. So I'd like to say something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this happens every time we have a call for sites, and we have to obviously be transparent and publish the results. And as Councillor Evans says there's an awful lot of sites sort of dotted about. And Push is doing some work on those, not just obviously in Winchester, but in the other Solent authorities as well. And I think, as Mr. Fox mentioned earlier, and I think as well Councillor Porter says, whatever happens, whatever algorithm is settled upon by the government and the figure that's produced at the end of that, I think we can rest assured that we're certainly not going to need all of those sites. There have been an incredible number of houses, and some of the sites obviously are not so well related to settlements as other sites. So that's why we have the process we go through. The reason we've got to do that is to have a plan that passes muster. Basically, you need to have sites which are deliverable. So one component you've got to consider when you're looking at how to plan for whatever number you end up planning for, you've got to be confident that land is available and deliverable. So you need an engagement process with developers, as much as you need an engagement process, of course, with parishes, the public, businesses and other stakeholders. So hopefully that gives that reassurance. There are many more sites than we need. There's probably enough there for many years beyond the plan period that we need to plan for. And part of what you need to do is have that development strategy once you know what the quantum is, but you can still outline what those strategies might look like, whether it's a strategy we've used before, whether it's something slightly different, are all things that go into the mix. But really the Sheila is just about trying to get a handle on what sites might be available, and certainly we then have to evaluate them to see which are the most suitable sites based around that development strategy, which is going to be sustainable. Yeah, it's the most sustainable strategy we can have. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, can I just come back?
Yes, of course.
I do take what you say, Mr. Finch, and but I do think it would be helpful to have some of that explanation. You know, there are more sites than we need in the text, because that will frighten people. And Chair, could I just mention one other thing while I've got your attention?
Yes.
On page 30, page 31, explore possible pilot project. I know that Wycombe Parish Council would be interested in being a pilot project to update their VDS. So if you could sort of make note of that, and I expect the clerk will be in touch, because it is quite an old VDS and will need updating. And I think they would be interested in being a pilot. Okay,
thank you very much. And I take what you say about paragraph on page 31, which is page 7 of the appendix, I think, which is about Sheila sites, which may form part of the growth areas. We'll make sure we change the wording slightly so that we can, or find a way of saying that so that it explains a little bit more of what you and Simon Finch have explained. Thank you. And I have written down about Wycombe. I'm sure lots of parishes would like to be part of that process too. Have anybody else got any other comments they'd like to make? Councillor Horrell, your hand is up. Is that a real hand or an old hand?
It is a real hand, Chair.
Go ahead.
And I'd like actually to reinforce some of the comments that I made earlier, and indeed other members have made, which is I think we need to be reassuring our residents of the district and not sowing seeds of doubt. And part of that can be in the looseness of our communication. And I agree completely. And I underline the same element in the document, which may form the basis of growth areas. The Sheilas cause confusion, and I know our officers are very well versed in the articulation of those, but if you are seeking support for Sheila areas in your consultation, which is what you have said in these documents today, and they amount to 44,000 housing opportunities, we need to be really clear with individuals about what that consultation will bring about and why it is being addressed, and that they are not confirmed sites for development. I hear the comments from Councillor Bell representing her ward. I equally could say visual devastation, we do not want it, and many of us, I'm sure, will have those same views. So I would ask that you and the officers look at this document to ensure that we don't leave that element of doubt, particularly on some of these descriptors that not everyone is as familiar with, and their implications for gaining, as Mr. Finch has rightly reminded us, an approved local plan at the end of the process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I do think, however, that there are some political leaflets that go out that perhaps throw those seeds of doubt as well, unfortunately, which is a real shame. But there you are. That's the way it goes, isn't it? That's politics for you. And the local plan is about making sure local communities have the chance of having their say at this stage of the game, or this stage of the work. And at the moment, unfortunately, we are in a situation of flux between one possible method for doing a local plan and a second method. And I really want to thank Mr. Fox and Mr. Finch and their whole team for making an effort to design a potential local plan action plan that incorporates both routes, so that whatever the speed at which the local plan goes to become legislation, our district is in a position that we can create a local plan that means something to local people and provides the housing and the employment that local people need. Has anybody else got any other comments they'd like to make? No? Yes. Oh, Councillor Weston. Oh no, actually, Councillor Weston, you're not part of the LALPAG, are you? So please do pass on your message as an email, and we can make sure that those questions are answered, as Councillor Hutchison as well. But thank you very much to members that have taken the effort to listen this afternoon. I think that's really helpful. Mr. Finch, do you want to say anything else to close?
Councillor Porter, sorry to interrupt. So Councillor Ferguson would like to make a comment.
All right, sorry, Councillor Ferguson. I can't see that. I could just see a.
Sorry. I also wanted to thank officers for coming up with this plan. of how we get to a local plan, and also for thinking really carefully around how we minimise unnecessary abortive work and expense, but we do find a way to actually, progress our local plan at this stage. I think it's a very difficult situation that local authorities have been placed in by central government around the planning white paper and all of the uncertainties that that's raised. But the officers have come up with an action plan, and I'm sure that the work we do now will, as you say, Chair, put us in a much better place to be ready to go when we get that certainty that we need. So I wanted to thank officers for producing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Finch, would you like to say anything?
Chair, I'd like to thank members of the advisory group, because it's been very, very useful. We've been sort of scribbling away furiously there, and we can work. And that was the whole point of this, actually, because it's a draft. It goes to Cabinet on the 16th of December, and then we will take the action, the consultation document through to Cabinet in January. So thank you. It's been very, very clear that we need to make sure the messaging is crystal clear and provide as much reassurance as we can do, accepting the fact obviously we're going to have to plan for some number of new developments at some point. But no, that's been really helpful. So as I say, we've got some very useful points out of that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And if any member or member of the public is online and wants to make a comment, then please do. We're also always ready to listen to those if you have one. I think this is a real test of reading through to see how it reads to one person, to check that it reads the same to another. So that's a really useful part of the local plan advisory group. Thank you very much indeed. As Simon Finch said, we'll be going through this process, this plan and this wording in December, and then we'll be bringing the actual options paper or issues paper to our January Cabinet. So thank you very much for coming this afternoon.
Chair, sorry, it's Councillor Evans wishes to make a comment, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Evans.
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to say thank you very much for setting up the local plan advisory group and including a cross-party representation. It's an open and transparent process. It's a difficult process, not helped. It's a bit like snakes and ladders. You start on it and then you fall down a snake because they changed the rules or whatever. You didn't see the snake coming up. But thank you very much. Anyway, it's been a very useful process. And as I say, it's nice to have a cross-party representation here today. So thank you.
And we're definitely climbing up the ladder now, Councillor Evans. Thank you very much indeed. Nancy, would you like to switch off the recording? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for a good meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you everyone for a good meeting. Councillor Cook, bye.
Thank you, bye.